Hello and welcome to another book video. I'm putting my own spin on this type of video that I've seen before, people taking different albums and recommending different books for each song on that album. But instead of just choosing a random album, I thought I would choose mine. If you didn't know, I'm a singer and songwriter in Nashville, and last year in 2025, I released my debut album. It still is so crazy to say that. We've already passed the 1 year mark for that album, and it still feels like yesterday I put it out. I love writing songs. I love listening to different artists. I love creating different stories and telling different stories from different perspectives, thus my love of reading. So today I'm going to recommend to you different books based off of the different songs on my album. We have 9 songs on the album, and I'm just gonna go in track list order, which means that the first song on the album is the title track, Blame It on My Heart. I'm not gonna go into detail about how the song came to be and the writing process and all of that kind of stuff. I have a separate series on YouTube called Baking My Songs, where I actually take one song per month and I bake it, tell you about the writing process, what went into creating the song, recording it, releasing it, all that kind of stuff. So here I'm just going to take my song and tell you how it relates to this book based off of lyrics, based off of tropes, characters, vibes, things like that. So starting with the first song, Blame It on My Heart, we are going to go with One Golden Summer. My song Blame It on My Heart is about falling in love very quickly. It's about going all in, not holding back with the person that you're in love with. And to me, this book screams Blame It on My Heart. I feel like the first interaction Charlie had with Alice, right from the get-go, he was already in love. If I remember correctly, their first interaction was like an email or a text or something, and in that email or text, he was already flirting. Like, he already had feelings for Alice. I also feel like this would be a fun summer song. Like, I could see this song being played on a boat while they're out boating, while they're all having a good time out on the water. Charlie, right away, was head over heels for Alice. So I feel like this song perfectly describes this book. Another recommendation is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. Again, from the male perspective, Daniel was clearly head over heels with Alexis. I'm thinking specifically of that scene where she's at the hospital working and he comes to surprise her with flowers or something, and her parents are there and they're very serious about their like family legacy. And with Daniel being a carpenter, dating their daughter who is a doctor, they're not very supportive of that, but he does not waver in his love for her. He goes all in with her, hence showing up to the hospital, bringing her flowers, showing his love for her, even though her parents are there and they do not approve. This was my first Abby Jimenez book, and I am afraid no book of hers since has lived up to this. So if you have any other Abby Jimenez recommendations, let me know. All right, next on the track list is my song Stupid Friends. One thing about my songs is they're all written based off of experience, so they're very niche. So sometimes it's kind of hard to find a book that kind of directly relates to my very niche experience that I wrote about. This song is about having a significant other who has stupid friends. And it sounds like this is a very simple concept that books could easily relate to it, but because of the lyrics, it makes it a little bit difficult. It starts off with, they're probably out circling by the fire conversating with girls they could never swing. A little bit hard there. Later on, I go on to say, permanent residents of their mama's basement. They're never gonna get that far. So again, it is very hard to find a book concept that closely relates to this. So because of that, I'm going to recommend books where the main character had a stupid friend, but it was in a good and positive and comedic relief kind of way. We have The Wedding People, the whole cast of characters, the friends that Phoebe makes along the way. All of them have their quirks and their weirdness, but they also have a lot of insight, especially while Phoebe is going through this time of depression and sadness. All the different people and the different adventures that they go on in the different places and things that they encounter along the way obviously really added to the story and helped Phoebe with the time she was going through. They definitely were very needed for this story. Not that they were stupid, but they just had some interesting qualities, I guess you could say. All right, moving on to the third song off of the album, we have You Ain't Him. This is a song about reminding yourself that the person you are with is not the person that you have been with. Just because you were with someone in the past who was not kind to you, didn't treat you right, doesn't mean that the person that you are with right now is like that. Trying to remember that this person that you are with now is so much better than who you have been with before. Again, kind of niche, but at the same time, I think there are book recommendations that would fit this song. So we're gonna start with Regretting You by Colleen Hoover. This one is interesting in relation to the song because it's not that Morgan and her husband didn't get along, but there's a little bit of a twist where you find out that things in their marriage weren't as they seemed. It's more so that Jonah steps into her life in a bigger way and shows her the love that she was deserving of all along. I remember when I first read this book, I was so shocked by what you find out pretty early on in here. I feel like the twist kind of came out of nowhere. Sometimes I associate twists or plot twists with mystery or thrillers. So with this being like a YA romance book, I was so taken aback by what you find out is actually had happened. But in this, Morgan definitely has to reconcile with the past. It was just nice to see Jonah step in and show her the real way that she should have been loved kind of the whole time. Lastly, for You Ain't Him, I hope this is not too much of a stretch, but we have The Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley Heller. I feel like if I read this book now, I wouldn't like it as much as I did back then. I'm just gonna be honest, the cheating trope is very loud in this book. That kind of is what the entire premise revolves around. It's not that Elle's husband is a bad husband, but she just has a deeper connection with her childhood best friend slash love. I feel like you could just say it was inevitable that they were gonna get together, even though she's full on married and has kids. But just looking at the relationship that she had with Jonas and everything that they went through in the past while they were growing up versus her relationship with her husband. But I feel like maybe throughout her marriage, she was telling herself that Jonas isn't her husband. I don't know. It could be a stretch, but I feel like there are also little glimpses of You Ain't Him in this book. Next, we have my song, If Prayer Had Prime. This one is such a fun concept. You're basically wishing that the perfect person would Amazon Prime to your door and just be there, and you don't have to do any work. You don't have to go on dates or do the whole dating app thing or whatever. You just Amazon Prime the perfect person to your front door, and boom, they're there. So with that concept in mind, the first book that I'm going to recommend for this song is going to be Funny Story by Emily Henry. We are following Daphne, who is engaged to her fiance, and shortly after they break up, she moves in with Miles, who is Daphne's fiance's girlfriend. And obviously, because it's a romance, you know how it's gonna end. I think that this song relates to this book because Daphne goes to live with Miles. There she is. If Prayer had Prime, they would be right there on the front doorstep, and she was. I would say out of all of Emily Henry's books, this one is probably the funniest. She always writes great banter and great love stories, but there was something about Miles in here that was just actually hilarious. I've seen people say that if you love Nick Miller, you would love Miles, and I completely agree. They are one and the same. Okay, next we have my song, Cowboy Looks Good on Him. This was my debut single for this album. I wrote it about my husband, who I watched lean into the Western lifestyle after we moved to Tennessee. I've actually never read a cowboy romance or a cowboy book, a Western, anything like that. If I'm not mistaken, I think I've started some, but I just couldn't get into them for whatever reason. But it is funny living in Nashville and having an actual song called Cowboy Looks Good on Him. I should read a cowboy romance, but I do not know where to start. So if you have any cowboy romances or book recommendations, let me know. I'm just going to recommend you books where the main character kind of embraces change. With that, we have probably one of my favorite books I've read this year, When in Rome by Sarah Adams. In this, Amelia is a pop star, and I think she breaks down in a small town in Kentucky. Here she crosses paths with Noah, who is a small town bakery pie shop owner. And of course they strike up a romance. But Amelia, being from Nashville, the big city, then going to this very small town in Kentucky, she really learns to love it there. The small town, the different people, kind of being out of the spotlight, she really embraces that change. And then after coming here, she really enjoys the slower pace of life that she finds. I've said this before, but I'm probably the last person to read this book or this series. So if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend for maybe more so like the fall time. I feel like this would be a good book in the fall. I think that this book and this series is more than a palate cleanser kind of romance. I feel like there is depth to these characters. So even though there's no cowboy reference in this book, it's nice to see that she leans into the change. Okay, another book where the main character has to step into a new role and embrace the change. We have The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry. This one is about a man who is kind of a recluse. He owns a bookstore. He keeps to himself. He's very much doesn't interact with people very much. But one day on his bookstore front stoop is a package, I guess you could say. This specific package changes his life, and he definitely has to step into a new role and embrace the change that requires him to step up. We jump ahead a lot, so we're skipping a lot of years in between the different characters' lives. It's so small, and I feel like because we're jumping around so much, I couldn't really get very acquainted with the different characters because we get to know certain things in their life, see them in certain time periods, and then we're on to the next. But I would still recommend this if you have not read it yet. All right, next on the album is my song, I Wish I Missed You More. I wrote this after I left Washington State. We moved to Tennessee, and looking back, I just, at the time, really didn't miss Washington, but of course now, there are days when I miss it. I just love Tennessee so much. So for this, I'm gonna recommend you books where the main character was glad that they moved on from whatever it is they were going through. I swear this is the only repeat that I have. But again, When in Rome by Sarah Adams. After she embraces the change of moving to Rome, Kentucky, she of course is glad she did because of the slower pace of life, living with Noah and his siblings. This one is kind of obvious, but it does relate to I Wish I Missed You More. Another book I think would closely relate to I Wish I Missed You More was The Missing Half by Ashley Flowers. We more so see the theme of I Wish I Missed You More from a different character, not the main character, but kind of like a side character, I guess. This side character having moved on from their past life and is creating a new life for them, and they do not miss who they used to be. For these last two songs, I actually think I hit the nail on the head with these book recommendations tying in with my songs. Next, we have Loving Someone Else, which is about wishing that the person you are with didn't love someone else. And for the first book, tying in with this song, we have The Favorites by Lane Fargo. If you've read this book, you know how well this song correlates with this book. This is probably one of the most dramatic books I have ever read before. Similar to Daisy Jones and the Six, it's written interview style. Certain chapters are interviews with people who are in the ice skating world. How dramatic and high stakes and crazy ice skating is. Certain people in the ice skating world are being interviewed on different events that have happened, and then other chapters you get what actually happened. Lots of scandal, lots of theatrics, lots of cheating, things like that. There is so much craziness that goes in to this story, but Loving Someone Else definitely has a place in this story. So many secrets, so much drama. Truly so much drama. I loved this book, and I listened to it on audio, which I think helped with my reading experience. There are so many narrators for all the different characters, all the different people being interviewed. It felt so real because of all these different people bringing these characters to life. So if you are interested in reading this, I would recommend it on audio. Then we have One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This song relates, although not in the cheating sense. In this one, we are following Emma, and she marries her high school sweetheart, Jesse. He gets on an airplane or something like that, and it goes missing. So then years later, she runs into a friend, Sam, and they get engaged. Well, then just after she found happiness with Sam, her husband, Jesse, finally gets found. So then she has to decide who she's gonna choose, her husband or her fiance, which is a hilarious sentence. The concept of this is so cool, but it also is very heartbreaking. Like, I honestly can't even imagine if my husband, I actually can't even think about that. How do you even make that decision? You have loyalty to two different people. I just think that this song relates in the terms of Jesse coming back from being missing out in the middle of the ocean. I think this song relates from his perspective, him thinking about her loving someone else. Lastly, on my debut album, we have my song, Then Again. While it is still summer, I think you should add this to your summer playlist. I may be biased, but this song is great to listen to with all the windows rolled down, driving through backcountry roads. I'm tying this song to Second Chance Romances. This song just reminisces on a love that you had with somebody. You're kind of living in the past and wishing you had with them what you had back then. And for that, I feel like the closest book for this song is The Summer We Ran by Audrey Ingram. There are even lines in this book that are so close to my lyrics. In the chorus, I sing about sneaking out the window with your hand on my thigh on the passenger side. There's a scene where they're literally in the car together driving, and I feel like the visual is just so the same as my song. I'm pretty sure there was another sentence in here that was so closely related to a lyric, but this is a second chance romance, obviously set during the summer. It's one of those stories where young kids fall in love and then something tears them apart. Years later, they come back together. This isn't a very unique story in that way, but it still very closely relates. Next, I'm going to go to the book that actually got me back into reading, You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hoggle. Following Naomi, who is engaged to Nicholas, somewhere along the way in their engagement, they basically stopped liking each other. In fact, I don't think they like each other at all, but they don't want to call off their wedding because whoever would do that has to foot the wedding bill. So now they're trying to get each other to call off the wedding by doing different things like pranks and things like that. But then of course, along the way, they start to fall back in love with each other. So thinking about this book, they didn't like each other, but then they slowly start to fall back in love. They are literally living the Then Again song concept. I remember I gave this book 5 stars because, again, it was the first book I read in years. I think if I were to read it now, I wouldn't rate it a 5 stars, but I'm just going to keep that rating and I will never change my rating for this. So I would highly recommend just a silly, goofy, fun time. Actually, I feel like it could also work for this book, Every Summer After. Percy goes to Barry's Bay in the summer with her family. There she meets the Florek brothers. One summer, something happens. This is such an overused storyline, but it also works. Anyway, a funeral brings her back to Barry's Bay years later, where she confronts her past and Sam and what happened there years ago. I remember being obsessed with this story, these characters, the setting, but then again, very closely relates to this book. I hope you enjoyed this video. It is very difficult finding books for my songs because again, they are very niche, but I tried my best. So I hope that if you have read these books and you do listen to these songs, you think that they relate as well. I would love to do this with other people's albums, but of course I had to do mine first. This is so fun. This is just a creative outlet for me, but when I have the time, this is a really fun way to just be creative and share books that I enjoy reading. Hope you enjoyed this video. I can't wait to do more, and I will see you in the next one.